You guys ready to go get something to eat?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's eat! Hi, welcome to Hunt and Gather with the Chatters. Today we're going to talk about reloading rifle ammunition. Today I'm going to be reloading 300 Win Mag. It's one of my favorite rounds. First of all, let me just say that this video should just be used to give you some general ideas or to see the experience. Because of all the safety that's involved in it, I don't want you to use my video as like a exact step-by-step process. It's the process I use and I feel good about it, but you should consult professional manuals and that nature. But anyways, let's get started. So the first thing you end up with is you have a spent cartridge here, and we need to get it cleaned up. These I actually already cleaned. If you have a tumbler, that's great. It's kind of pricey though, and if you don't reload a lot, there's a workaround. You can use one of these kind of Brillo type pads, and you just want to give it a slight rubbing on the outside there. And then where that neck is, that's where it gets pretty dirty. Maybe give it just a little bit more, but you don't need to go much. You're just trying to get that powder residue off of there. And then you can see it's all nice and shiny. And then you just want to get all your debris off, wipe it off, so that you don't clog up your die. All right, that's step one, just cleaning them. Next, we'll punch out the primers and resize the shell back to its original size. Okay, the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need a reloader. I just have this little single stage reloader that basically does it all. It's not real fast, but they're the cheaper way to go if you're just trying to reload, like say large rifle shells where you're not doing a bunch of volume. I was lucky enough that a buddy gave this to me. But I think you can find them at a pretty reasonable price. And then you're going to need a die set. So, you know, make sure you got the right die for your shell. This is a 300 Win Mag. It comes with the loading die there when you put the bullet in. But first we're going to screw in the die that punches out the primer and resizes the shell. And then there's also a shell holder here that you need in the bottom. So those are a little more generic, like this one works for several size rifles, including the 300 Win Mag, but make sure you get the right one for you. We're going to clip that one in there. I'm going to set my die so that when it's all the way up, so I have it fully compressed right now. I'm going to screw this die in until it makes contact when it's all the way up. And then I'm going to back it down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 1/4 turn more than that. Okay? Then I'll lock everything down in that place and I'll be ready to punch out and resize. Okay, before we place them in the resizer and the primer punch, we need to lightly lubricate the shell. So again, you've wiped off your shells, you know there's no debris on the outside, that's important. Now we're just going to give them a light coat of this case lubricant. There's several brands you can use, but it's a super lightweight oil. All right, so now we're ready to punch the primer out and reshape our brass to the original dimensions. So we just slip it in there like that, Put it in our shell holder. And then we're going to do one stroke up and down. Okay, so that's all good. The primer's punched out. And we're just going to wipe off the oil on the outside of the shell. And then we'll just cycle through the rest of them. Before we clean up our shell, we need to check the overall shell length. So you need a reloading book, or at least get online and look the information up. This is from the Nosler reloading book. But you can see that on the 300 Win Mag, the overall shell length should be 2.620 inches. And so that's kind of a max. You can go, you can go just a smidgen over, but you can go a little bit under, but you want it to be close to that number. So we're going to check our shell. So you can see the shell is 2.618, so that's just slightly undersized. It's actually pretty ideal. So now we'll go ahead and clean it up. If they weren't perfect size, then what you can do is you can get one of these tools here and you can actually shave it down just a little bit. You want to go in small little adjustments. And then, of course, after you do that, you kind of want to clean up the neck a little with a little sandpaper there at the end, so it's not burred. But then just keep rechecking the length till you get it. Okay, now we got our shells. They're all resized. The primers are punched out. Now we're just going to kind of brush out that interior neck and then also kind of clean that primer pocket and hole a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a regular rifle cleaning brush, and I'm just going to insert it in there, and I'm going to go in and out about 3 times. Okay. Next, I'm going to take, I like to use just a little screw, and I'm just going to kind of wiggle it back and forth in that primer hole a few times and just make sure that that hole's all clear in there. Then next, I take my primer pocket tool and I put it in there and twist it around a few times, rotate the shell, twist it around a few times. And that way we know the primer pocket is all nice and clean now. And then the last thing I like to do is I like to take a Q-tip and just kind of swab the inside of that primer pocket hole. And then that's it, other than when I get all these done, I'll kind of blow them out with an air compressor. But essentially they're ready for primers now. Okay, so now we're ready to put primers in. You want to make sure you use the right primer. Like for the 300 Win Mag, it takes what they call a large rifle for Magnum primer. So, you know, I want to make sure I use the Magnum primer. For my 270, it just takes large rifle. So, you know, but consult your book or reloading manual and it'll tell you which one to use. Okay, the primer is just this little cup here. We're just going to set it in there and just start it with our finger. And then you should always wear safety glasses too. I'll even kind of push it against wood just to kind of get it started. But bottom line is, whenever you're using pressure against that primer, you want to make sure it's something flat. Because if you use something pointed, it could make the primer go off. And you also want to make sure there's a way for the gas to escape if the primer did go off. I've never had one go off, but it doesn't mean it couldn't happen. So there's primer tools you can buy, and they're probably not a bad idea. But I've learned that I can kind of simulate it with a washer up there, and that'll allow the primer, if it was to go off, it'll allow the gas to come up through the hole in the washer and out the top. And with it just being a primer, it's not a ton of pressure, but you wouldn't want to constrict it. And it's really just a slight amount of pressure. It doesn't take much. But you want to make sure it lays flat, you know, it doesn't wobble. And so that one's good. All right, we're going to finish putting the primers in all of our shells, and then we'll be ready for the next step. Okay, now we're going to set our bullet seat die to the correct height. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a shelled casing in there, and we're going to run it to the top of the stroke. Okay, we're going all the way as far as it'll go. Okay, so that's max height. Then we're going to screw this down until we feel a fair amount of resistance, but just using our fingers. Okay, right there. Now we're going to back it up one full turn. And we'll lock it in place, and then the first one we load, we'll check the height to see if it's correct. I wanted to show you what bullet I'm using. I'm using a Nosler Accubond 165 grain. I actually kind of prefer the 180 grain, but lately it's been hard to get them, and this is pretty good. So that's the bullet I'm using, and then according to my chart, I can get a maximum overall shell length with the bullet in there of 3.340 inches. So that's what I'm going to keep tweaking my die to get that length. And as far as loading it, I'm using the IMR 4350 powder. I can go as high as 72 grains, but I found in my gun it shoots best with 71 grains. So that's what I'm going to be using. But again, you got to get a good reference book and then adhere to those maximums, but also try shooting a few loads at different grains, because a certain bullet or a certain powder weight might actually be more ideal. And, you know, 71 grains, I'm still getting almost the same amount of velocity, but yet I'm getting better accuracy, so that's what I'm going to go with. Okay, so I got my IMR 4350. I got my powder scale. I just used this little Hornady powder scale. I think it was about 30 bucks. It works great if you're just doing, you know, individual rifle loads. Main thing is when you're dealing with the powder, you don't want to touch anything with your fingers that the powder's going to touch. You don't want that finger grease to get into your powder. So I'm going to turn on my scale. And you want to try to do this on a day with very little humidity. So we live in Arizona, so that's a blessing because that's most days. And I want to check it. So I have a little weight that's the right size there. So yeah, I have a 70 grain weight, and sure enough, it's saying 70 grains. So I know it's going to be accurate. And I think I previously told you I was going to load them at 71 grains, but I just checked my previous reloads that had the best accuracy, and it was actually 70 grains, 70.0 grains that was the best. So that's what I'm going to load in there. You want to make sure you keep your powder dry. So I'll put this lid on in between measuring. Okay, so I overshot it by 2 grains, so now I'm going to remove a little. Okay, that's 70 grains exactly. I'm going to load it into my shell. All right, now that shell's ready to place a bullet in there and load it. Okay, so I got my bullet just placed on there loosely, and I got it ready, and this is just the initial go around. We'll see if we need to adjust the height after we do this one. Okay, so my first shell was a little long. The book says I can go to 3.340 inches. It's exactly where I want it. It's 3.330. And I've learned in my gun, that's where it shoots the most accurate, is if I underdo the length by 10 thou. But main thing is you can't go over that maximum length, and you don't want it greatly undersized either. So I'm gonna, now that I got the die set, now I can cycle through the rest of them. All right, we got all of our shells loaded, and they're all essentially 3.330 inches, which shoots really good out of my gun, and it's a safe length. Hopefully you enjoyed this demonstration of just how to reload rifle ammunition. You can go real expensive and get all kinds of nice equipment like a progressive loader and all that. That's one route. Another route is to go real simple like I did, and it becomes economical. I can make a cartridge that's going to shoot a primo bullet at an ideal grain weight, and since I've measured out each one individually, it'll be very accurate. And it's a little cheaper than if I just bought off-the-shelf ammo. Although, to be honest, if you buy off-the-shelf ammo, such as the Winchester PowerPoints, they're pretty accurate right out of the box, and they're approaching a similar velocity. So it's really up to you. But please just use this as a guide, just to kind of see it be done. But you should definitely follow your reloading manual and select expert advice just due to the safety concerns and whatnot of reloading. But hopefully you had fun, and thanks for watching Hunt and Gather with the Chatters. Please hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. And we'll see you next time when we go get something to eat. Thank you.